Okay guys, so welcome back again. So in this video, let's see that how do we use the Google OAuth with one tap inside our Next.js application using the Stitch SDKs. So Stitch is a user authentication platform for developers. So basically it has multiple products like email magic links, SMS passcodes, WhatsApp passcodes, OAuth logins and that's what we are going to do. We are going to use the Google OAuth for this video, and we would be implementing Google OAuth with one tap sign in. And I would be showing you a demo in a moment. And then they have several other products like magic links, email passcodes, and they also have session management. So if you haven't already signed up to Stitch, you can sign up using the link in the description below. So without wasting any time, let's dive into the demo application that I created earlier. So here is the demo application. As we can see, we have a typical navigation bar at the top, and then we have a sign-in widget here. And this widget is powered by Stitch. That is, it is powered by the Stitch SDKs, in which I have configured the Google one-tap sign-in. So what happens is this, that as soon as I click here, that is on my username, that is the Google username here. So if I click here, it simply verifies without redirecting us. And then finally, we are redirected back to the profile page. So we see that this is the profile page, and here we get all the information about the user that is currently signed in. And if I wanted to log out, then I would be simply clicking on logout, and then we are back on the home page. And this is all done using session management with Iron Sessions in Next.js. So without wasting any time, let's dive into the code. So as we see here that I've created a very basic Next.js application or using the create next app package. So what I did, I simply did npx create next app and the name of my application. So this is what we get as a starting point here. That is the default template for Next.js application. So the first thing which we need to do, we need to go inside our Stitch dashboard to configure some credentials for Google OAuth. So let's go to our Stitch dashboard, and here as we can see that here inside my Stitch dashboard, we can create as many projects as we want. So here for this demo purposes, I've created this project called YouTube tutorial. And here we have a couple of things here, but what we are interested in this video is this, the OAuth thing and the redirect URLs. So firstly, let's go to the OAuth thing here. And here we have a couple of options for OAuth. We have Google, Microsoft, Apple, GitHub, Facebook, and Slack, which is coming soon. But we would be focusing on this Google thing. So let's click on Google thing here. And here we have two environments, either the test environment or we can have the live environment. So this is basically for production, but for development purposes, we would be using the test environment. But the logic is the same for live or test environments. So let's simply click here, get started. And it provides you with basically all the steps that you need to perform on your Google console. That is the Google Cloud Console to configure project. So let's click on get started. And we need to copy this URI and then we need to paste it somewhere. And before that somewhere is known to us, we need to create a project on Google Cloud Platform. So if you already have a project, you can configure the consent screen and then you can configure the client OAuth credentials. But here what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new project. So the project name is Stitch OAuth tutorial, though it can be any other name what you like. And for the location, I'm simply selecting no organization. So let's click on create, and it will take a moment or so to create this project. So the first thing we need to do here is to configure the OAuth consent screen before creating the credentials. So let's click here, that is OAuth consent screen. And here for the user type, let me choose external. So let me click on create. And this is typically the default value which you need to choose, that is the external value. And then we need to provide the app information here. And here you can put in your domain name or the name of your application. So here I'm simply going to call it my-app.com. That is the name of my application. And for the support email address, let me select my default support email address. And I advise you not to put in your app logo, because if you put in your app logo, then your OAuth consent screen or your project would be in pending state, and you won't be able to use Google OAuth until and unless your project is approved. So I would highly recommend that you do not put an app logo as of now. For the app domain, just leave it empty. And for the authorized domains, we do not need to put in any authorized domains as of now. And here for the developer contact information, let me simply provide in my email address. So let's click on save and continue. And then we can add and remove scopes from here. So typically it does not require any scopes to be enabled, but if you want, you can simply enable these three scopes, that is the user info, email, the profile, and the OpenID. But for this project, I'm not going to enable any of these because we are only interested in getting the email from the Google OAuth login. So let's simply do not add any or add or remove any scopes. And now let me simply click on save and continue again. And then we need to add in some test users so that we can able to test our application. And if we do not add a test user here, we would be getting a 403 forbidden error. So let me add in a test user here. So let me add a couple of test users here. So these are the two test users that can access our application as of now, because it is in pending state. So let's click on add, and these two users have been created. So let's click on save and continue. And this is basically the summary of the application. So let's simply click on back to dashboard. And now what we need to do, we need to go to this credentials thing here, and we need to create OAuth credentials here. So we need to click here, that is create credentials. And here we need to create a OAuth client ID. So let me click here. And now for the application type, whatever application you are creating, either the mobile application or the web application, I would highly recommend you to select only the web application, because Stitch works this way. So let's select web application, and here you can give this application any names, because it is not visible to the end users. And now here we need to provide in some authorized JavaScript origins. And if you do not provide in the authorized JavaScript origins, then your Google One tab might not work. So here basically what I need to provide here, I need to provide in two origins. Firstly, we need to provide in localhost, and secondly, we need to provide in localhost 3000 also. So make sure that you add in the port number on which your Next.js application is running. So my Next.js application is running on port 3000. So I'm simply providing in localhost port 3000. And make sure that you add in both these things here, or both these values here, localhost also and localhost port 3000 also. For the redirect URIs, what we need to put here, we need to put in a URI that we get from the Stitch dashboard. So let's go to the Stitch dashboard. So here, to set up the Google OAuth, we need to copy this URI from here, and then we need to paste it here. So let me go here. So let me paste it here. And now let me simply click on create. So we see that our client ID is this ID and our client secret is this secret. So what we can do, we can copy this client ID and client secret, and we can paste them inside our Stitch dashboard. So let's go to our Stitch dashboard here, and let's simply click on next here. And here it says that we need to add in redirect URL. So we would do that in a moment. So let it be like this. So let's simply click on next. And here we need to paste in the client ID and the client secret, which we can get from the Google dashboard. So let's copy the client ID from here. Let's paste it here. And for the client secret, let me simply copy this client secret, and let me paste in the client secret here. And now let's simply click on next. We can test our connection, but we can do that in a moment because we need to enter the redirect URLs. So let's simply click on finish here. And now what we can do, we can go to our redirect URLs to configure the redirect URLs for the Google OAuth. So let's simply click here. And here we need to paste in one redirect URL. So http:// port 3000, because that is the port on which our Next.js application runs. And then we would be creating an API endpoint inside our Next.js application, and that would be called login. So I would be providing that here. So API:/login. And this route, that is API login, is not yet created inside our Next.js application. So we would be doing that in a moment. And for the type, let's select all here, so that all the requests would be redirected to this login thing here. So let's simply click here all. And now let's simply set it as the default value, and let's simply click on confirm here. And now we have the login redirect URLs. And now if we go to our OAuth thing here, and let's go to this Google thing again. And now we can try out the connection. Or before trying out the connection, let me create that API endpoint inside our Next.js application. So let's go to our Next.js application. And here inside the API folder, what I need to do, let me delete this hello.js file because it is not necessary. And here I'll create not a new folder, but I want to create a new file called login.js like this. And here what I want to do, I want to create an async function, which would be handling the request coming to this route. So async function handler would take in request and response, and then we can simply complete that function later on. And we want to export this as a default value. So export default handler, simply like this. And for now, what I can do, I can simply redirect from this function here to our index page as of now, because that is the only page which we have inside our application. So what I can do, I can simply say res.redirect / That is, if any request comes to this route, that is this endpoint or this API endpoint, that is API/login, then we simply want to redirect the user back to the index route. So now what I can do, I can test my OAuth flow so that we can verify that everything is working. So what I can do, I can click here, that is try it out. So now we see that we get this page here, and here we can choose our account, that is a test user here. And as soon as we hit this route, we see that we are back to our index page. So now let's go back to our application here, and now let's configure this application to handle the login and logout routes and to get the session also. So what I'll do, I'll create a folder here inside this root application or the root directory to simply contain the components here. So components like this, and here I would be creating two files, that is the navbar.jsx, not ksx but jsx, and layout.jsx. so layout.jsx, simply like this. And inside my navbar.jsx, I would be creating a functional component here. And inside the navbar, what I wanted to paste here, very simple HTML and CSS. So let me simply copy this piece of code from here and let me paste it here. So here what I've done is this, that I've created this nav component here. That is, firstly we have the header, then we have the nav, and inside the nav we have this thing here, that is the stitch OAuth, and these class names are only for styling purposes. And then we have the next link, which should be coming from the next link package here, that is from next link. And then we have li here, which says logout, which should simply call in a function called logout. So let me create a function here called logout like this, and this should be an async function because I would be doing something asynchronous here. So let this function be like this here. And now what I want to do, I want to create a layout file here. So let me create a layout file here, and inside this layout file, I want to simply return in a div here. So let me return in a div which contains the navbar. So navbar like this, and then we have the main tags here, and these are only for styling purposes again. And here I simply want to render out the children. So children like this, and these children are coming as props here inside this layout thing here. So that is what is rendered inside this main tags here. And now what I can do, I can go to my styles folder here, and inside the globals.css, I would be pasting in some CSS files so that our application looks better than it is looking currently. So now what I can do, I can go to my index.js file, and here what I'll do, I'll remove each and everything from here inside the return statements because we would be using our own layout component. So here we want to return layout, and here let me simply put in some p tags here, and that can say something like something. So let me save it, and now we see that here we have a typical navigation bar. So now what I want to do here is to display a one-tap sign-in feature here. So for that I need to install a couple of dependencies here. So let me stop the application and let me clear out the console. So let me install a Stitch, because this Stitch SDK would be used in the backend to verify the user. And then we have the Stitch package, that is the Stitch SDK for the front-end application or for the React application. And then I also wanted to use Axios later on in the video, and I also wanted to use Iron Session here. So let me install Iron Session also, and just make sure that you do not use the deprecated Next Iron Session, and instead you should be using the Iron Session library. So that's all what we need to install. So let me press enter. So now the packages have been installed. So let me start the application in background so that it is continuously running. And now here I want to display a sign-in widget. So what I can do, I can import something from Stitch React, that is the front-end Stitch package for React. And here I wanted to import a Stitch, and I want to render out this thing inside our layout tags. So here I can simply say, I can create a container here and with a class name of, and again this class name is only for styling purposes, and it should say login container. And inside here I would simply render out this Stitch widget. So Stitch like this, like this. And now we need to pass in some values here, that is the public token. So public token would be something, and I would be copying and pasting the public token in a moment. And then optionally, if you wanted to provide in your own styles, you can have a look at the documentation and you can provide in your own styles. And here I want to configure the login or sign up view. So inside here, what I wanted to do, the products which you want to display inside this Stitch widget would be the Google OAuth one tap. So I can say products would be an array, and here I can simply pass in OAuth, simply like this. And then what I can do, I can provide some OAuth options here. So OAuth options would be an object here containing the providers. So providers like this, and providers would again be an array. So the first type would be the Google type. So let me provide in Google here like this, and here I can provide in one tab or one underscore tab to be true, so that we can see the one tap sign in feature also. And the position would be embedded. So position would be embedded, simply like this. And now that's all what you need to do here for this stitch thing here. And to provide in a public token, what we can do, we can create an environment variable file here, or the env.local file. So let me create a file here .env.local like this, and here I need to create in one environment variable, and that would be called next public token here. So let's go to the environment file here, and this is the public token here. And to make this public token client side accessible, we need to prepend it with public next public token. And now let's get this public token from the Stitch dashboard. So let's go to the Stitch dashboard and let's click on API keys, and here at the very bottom we have the public token. So let's copy and paste it here. And now to make this environment variable effective, we need to start our Next.js application again. So let me clear out and let me do npm run dev again. And now let's go to the index page here, and if everything went well, we should be seeing our sign-in widget here. So let me reload the page here. And we can see that we already have a sign-in widget here, but we are not seeing the one tap thing here because we need to use this public token inside our index.js file. So here what we can do, we can simply say process.env.next public token, like, and this should be in curly braces. So let's save this application and let's try to reload the page. And we see that we are getting here continue with Google powered by Stitch, and we are not seeing the one tap sign in, and we would be fixing that in a moment. So let's try to click on continue with Google, and now we are redirected here. So let's select our account and we should be redirected back to our index page. So the flow seems to be complete with this page here. And in case you do not want to use in the sign-in widget by this Stitch SDK, what you can do, you can create your own anchor tag here, and the href would be provided in a moment. So I can say login with Google like this, and for the href, what we can do, we can go back to our Stitch dashboard, and here what we can do, we can simply copy this piece of code that is implement Google OAuth, and we can simply copy this URL from here, and we can paste that URL here inside the href here. And that's all what we need to do. And if I click on this anchor tag here, that is login with Google, we are taken to the Google page, and then we should be redirected back to our index page. So this is also fine if you do not want to use the Stitch SDK for the front end. So let me comment out this thing from here. So now let me go to this login API file, that is this login.js file, because we need to handle the request that is coming from the Stitch endpoint to this handler here, which is simply redirecting back us to the index page. We need to handle the request that is coming from the Stitch endpoints. So we can check here, that is if request.method, and we see here that we are not getting auto completion here. So for that, what I can do, I can simply add in some JS docs for this function here, so that we can get better auto completion. So add doc comments here. So here the first parameter, that is the request parameter, it is basically a next API request, and the second parameter is simply the next API response, like this. And now we can get auto completion here. So request.method equal to get, then we want to handle do something. So let me take this piece of code here. Else what we can do, we can simply rest.status would be 4 of 5, that is method not supported, and we can simply send it. So here inside this request, we would be getting a query parameter called token, and we would be using that token to be verified from the Stitch SDKs from the Stitch servers. So we can get the token like this. So const token equal to request.query like this, and then we need to verify this token, and to verify that token we need to create an instance of the Stitch client. So let me create a new folder here, and let me call it lib, and here inside this lib folder I would be creating a new file that would be loading up our Stitch client. So let's simply call it load stitch.js like this. And inside this load stitch.js, what I want to import everything as stitch from stitch. It should be from, and here I can say let client. And this is all what I'm doing here is because I want to create a singleton instance of this stitch client so that we are not recreating the client instance again and again. So I can say const load stitch equal to an arrow function. And here what I can do, I can check if not client, then we are going to create a new client. So I can say client equal to new stitch dot client. And here we need to pass in a couple of things, that is the project ID. And this would be coming in from the environment variable in a moment. And then we need to provide in the secret like this. And then we need to provide in some stitch envs. So I can provide in the stitch envs like this. That is, if the process.env dot node env equal to production, then what we want to do, we want to use this thing here, that is stitch dot envs dot live. Otherwise, we are going to use stitch.envs.test, simply like this. So let's save this. And now to fill in this project ID in this secret, we want to create in two variables here, that is stitch project ID. So stitch project ID, and I want to also create the client secret, maybe stitch. Let me call it simply secret here. So stitch secret equal to. And these two values we can get from the stitch dashboard again. So let's go to the stitch dashboard, and inside the API keys, I can copy the project ID here and I can paste in the project ID. And for the stitch secret, I can copy this stitch secret from here and let me paste it here. And here, let me paste it for reference here. So the project ID would be process.env. This is stitch project ID. And similarly for the secret, I can simply paste in the secret here, that is stitch secret like this. And now our client is loaded. And now again, in this file, if I wanted to client dot something, we see that we are not getting auto completions here. So to fix this, what we can do, we can add in a type here for this client here. Since we are not using TypeScript, so we can provide in our own types using the JS docs thing here. And here I can simply say stitch dot client like this, and it should be stitched like this. So stitch dot client like this. And finally, I wanted to export this load stitch as a default from here. So I can say export default load stitch like this. So I can use this load stitch inside my login API endpoint. So here I can get the client like this. So const client equal to load stitch. And this load stitch is automatically imported from this lib folder here. And now what we can do, we can verify the token using this client here. So I can say const response equal to await client dot OAuth, and we're not getting auto completions here. So maybe we need to forward the return statement inside this load stitch. And yes, we need to return the client from this function, because then only we would be having access to this client thing here inside this from inside the login file. So this is one mistake here which I did earlier. So let's go to our API endpoint. So now we might be getting OAuth. Yes, so authenticate, and here we can pass in the token. So now we are using await inside an async thing here. So what we can do, we can wrap this this piece of code inside a try and catch block. So try catch like this. So let me put catch at the very bottom. So if there is an error, I can simply say res.status would be 500.send, and something went wrong. Simply like this. And now if we have a response here, that means that we have been successfully authenticated. And what we can do, we can establish a session between the server and the client using the Iron Session library that we installed earlier, that is this Iron Session library. So for now, what I can do, I can simply res.redirect here to /profile, And here I can simply log in the response just to show it to you. So console.log response. So let me save it. And I guess that the application is started. So what I can do, I can reload the page and let me open the terminal here. So now let me simply click on continue with Google, and most likely we would be getting a 404 because this profile page does not exist. So let me simply click on continue with Google. And now let me select the account here. We should be getting a response here in a moment. So this is the response here which we get here. We get a user ID here and then the provider type here. And we do not get a user email address because because we need to use this user ID to fetch the user information, and we can display that user information on the profile page later on. And we see that we are redirected back to the profile page, but the profile page does not exist here. So let me create a profile page here. So let's create a profile page like this. So inside the pages folder, let me create a profile page.js. And here let me simply export in a functional component that says profile page like this. So let's save this, and we see that now we are on the profile page. So let me go back to the localhost page. And now what I can do, I can wrap this profile page again inside the layout component which we created earlier. So let's create that. So if I go to profile here, we see that we are inside the profile page. And if we have a look at the Stitch dashboard, we can go to this users management tab here, and here we can see all the users that are registered to our Stitch application. So now what I wanted to do, instead of simply sending back or redirecting back to the profile page like this and simply logging in the response like this, I wanted to establish a session between the server and the client so that we can have authenticated requests from the client. So if we simply inspect this page here, and if we go to the application tab here, we see that we have this access token which is not related to this thing here. So let me delete this access token. So if I refresh the page, we do not have any session management or session management cookies here. So what we'll do, we'll create a cookie, or we'll create a signed cookie using the Iron Session library that would be stored on the client side. So for that, I would be using the Iron Session package. That is this package that we installed earlier. So let's go to our login.api route. So let's go to this route here. And here what we want to do, we want to import something from the Iron Session next. So here I can do import something from Iron Session. So Iron Session /next. And here I want to import in a function here, or a higher order component that is with Iron Session API route. And now what I want to do, I want to export this API component or this API handler using the Iron Session API route. So it is pretty simple to do. So instead of simply exporting this as a default value, what I can do, I can export it with Iron Session API route. And here we need to pass in the handler, and here we need to pass in some session options. So here we can provide in the password for the cookie, and that is simply a cookie password. So I'll provide that in a moment, because that all would be again coming in from the environment variables file. And then I want to provide in a cookie name. So let me pass in the cookie name from the environment variable itself. And then I need to pass in some cookie options. That is how long the session would be valid and not. So let me provide in the cookie options like this. That is the max age would be 15 days times 24 hours times 60 minutes times 60 seconds, because it takes time in seconds. And then we need to provide in secure, whether the cookie should be secure or not. That is, it should be sent over HTTPS only. So I can simply say process.env.node equal to production. That is, if we are in production mode, simply use only HTTPS for sending the cookie. Otherwise, we are not using secure cookies. And now for this cookie password and this cookie name, what we can do, we can again create two environment variables inside our env.local file. So let's go here, and for the simplicity, I'm simply going to paste it here. So this is the Iron Session cookie password, and this password is simply generated using this command here, that is open SSL rand 32-base64 to generate a base64 string of 32 characters. And then I'm simply using this Iron Session cookie name, that is X session, or let me simply call it X access token. So this can be any name, like it doesn't matter here. So I'm calling it this way here. So now what I can do, I can go to I can copy these two variables from here, that is these two environment variables, and here inside the password, let me paste those variables first. And here for the password, I can say process.env.iron session cookie password. And similarly for the cookie name, I can simply pass in the cookie name, iron session cookie name, like this. And now let me get rid of these two. And now one more thing, that we are going to use these same session options in a couple of different places. So why not let's simply create these session options inside a separate file itself. So what I can do, I can go to this lib folder and I can create a new file, and here I can create a new file called session options.js, and here I can simply export in a constant value. So export const session options would be equal to something, and that something would be simply this thing here, that is all this space of code inside these parentheses. So let me cut it out from there and let me paste it inside the session options like this, and let me save this. And now we can use the session option, or let me call it options, and now we can use the session options at each and every place wherever we require them. So let's go to this login endpoint, and here with iron session API route, here I can simply provide in session options like this. And this session options is automatically imported from the file we created. So let me save this. And now what we can do, we can use the request.session object inside our this route, that is this login handler. So here, instead of responding back with a response, I can simply say request.session.destroy, that is firstly destroy the session, and then I can say request.session.user_id would be equal to response.user_id, because this is the value which is stored inside this response. So I can simply create this variable inside my session object. And now what I can do, I can say await request.session.save like this, and finally I am redirecting him back to the profile page. So I can save this piece of code from here, and if everything went well, we might be having a cookie stored somewhere inside our application. So for that, let me stop the application once and let me start the application again, so that our environment variables are into effect. So let me minimize the terminal and let me reload the page here. And currently we see that we have this next auth session, just ignore it. So let me delete it. And we see that we do not have any x-axis token here. So if I increase the font size, so let me do it this way. So let's simply click on continue with Google. And let's simply select my account here. And now we see that we have this thing here, that is x-axis token. That is inside the cookies here, and it is x-axis token. And it is an HTTP only cookie, as we can see from this thing here, that is this is HTTP only. And secure is not true because we are in the development environment, and the value of the cookie is this value. So now everything is going well. I would be displaying in the profile information later on, but I wanted to show you one more thing, that is if we go to the home page, we see that we are again getting this widget here, that is continue with Google. But we can verify that we are already logged in because we already have a cookie here, that is x-axis token. So how do we handle this thing here? So we can handle this thing using the server-side rendering. So let's go to our index.js page. And here inside the index.js page, what I wanted to do, I wanted to export in a function here with iron session server-side rendering. So I can create a function here. So async function handler would be equal to something like this, and here inside the handler we would be getting the context, and this I'm calling this function handler. I could have easily called it get server side props like this, but I'm not calling this server side props because I want to make this a higher order component. That is, this get server side prop should be a higher order component. So therefore I'm simply calling it handler as of now. And here what we have the request from the context. So I can say const request equal to context like this. And then from this request, we can get in the user ID very easily. So we can say const user underscore ID would be equal to request dot session dot user ID. And then if there is no user ID inside this request dot session dot user ID, we can simply return null for this user ID thing. So here what we can do, we can return some props. So props would be this user ID like this. And now to make this context or this request object have this session here, so we need to export this handler as a higher order component. So what we can do, we can export a function here, that is export const get server side props like this, and this should be equal to with iron session server side rendering. And this is again imported from iron session only, not from next iron session, but from iron session here. And this is not required here. So with iron session SSR, and here we need to provide in the handler, which is this handler, and then we need to provide in the session options. So this is the session options that we created earlier. So that is this session options. So we are using these session options here. And now if we save this, and what we can do, we can have this user ID as a prop here inside my index component. So it should be like user underscore ID like this. So now what I can do, I can check for this user ID. So if we have a user ID, then we wanted to display something. Otherwise, we wanted to display something else. So if we do not have a user ID, that is this user ID's value is null, then we wanted to display in this login container. So let me cut this container from here and let me paste it here. And if we have a user ID, then we simply want to display in the user ID. So let me simply display the user ID here. So user ID like this. So now if we save this application and if we try to reload the page, we see that we get this thing here, that is user test, and this is the user ID. And now I wanted to show you one more thing, that is if we are not logged in, then I wanted to protect this profile page. That is, we should not be able to go to this profile page. So that is pretty simple to do. So let's go to our profile page.jsx file, and here I wanted to copy some piece of code. So what I can do, I can copy this handler function using the server side rendering higher order component, and I can paste this thing inside my profile page. And now again, we have this get server side props as a higher order component. So let me import this thing from here, and let me remove this dist from here, and we need to import the session options also like this. And now here what we can do, instead of providing in a default value of null, we can check if not user ID. That is, if there is no user ID, I want to simply return from this function. And here what I simply want to do, I want to redirect. So let me write it. So redirect destination would be your index route, and whether it is permanent or not. So permanent would be false. And this is all again Next.js stuff. It is not related to this Stitch product. I'm simply telling it to you that how do we use the session here, that is this iron session here. So this is all what you need to do to make this route protected. So let's save this. Let me save this thing from here and let me reload. So let's go to the profile page. We are able to see the profile page because we are logged in, because we have the access token. But watch what would happen if I go into inspect mode. Let's go to the application, and if I simply delete this access token from here, and if I reload the page, we see that we are redirected back to the index page, and we see here that continue with Google. But this is not the way you want to log out users by making them deleting the cookies. We want to use this logout button somehow. So it is pretty simple to do. So let's go to this napa.jsx file. And here we need to handle this logout function. So it is pretty simple to do. So we need to create a logout endpoint inside our API pages or inside our API endpoint. So let me create a new file, that is logout.js like this. And here what I can do, I can simply create an async function here. So async function would be handler. It takes in the default and request response here. And then we can check that if method equal to delete, then we can do something else. Else we can simply say res.status would be 405, that is method not supported, .send like this, and this should be request.method. And now for auto completion, I can provide in some JS doc here, that is this request and response object. And here we can say request.session.destroy. And now we can simply say not request.status, but res.status would be 204, and then we can simply send it. That is, we are sending back an empty response. And now I want to export this handler with server-side API route. So I can simply say export default with iron sessions API route, and we need to provide in some session options. So we can again import the session option, and we can again import the with iron session API route. So this is all what needs to be done here. And now let's go to the nav bar here. So here inside this logout function, what we need to do, we can say await Axios dot not defaults but delete, and here we can pass in the API route, so logout like this. And then finally we want to redirect back the user to the index page. So for that we need to use the router. So import from next router or router, whatever you call it, so use router. So here we can have const router equal to use router, so use router like this. And here I can say router dot push / simply like this. So let's save this, and if everything goes well, we should be handling it. So first let's go to the home page, and we need to sign in. So we need to sign in with our account here. And now we are on the profile page. So let's click on logout, and we see that we are on the index page, and we are not able to go to the profile page, as we can see, because that is again server side protected. So now let's have a last bit of code here, that is how to display information inside this profile page. So it is pretty simple to do. So we need to create one more API endpoint, and that is me.js, so that we can get the details about us. And for this me.js route, we need to have similar options. So let me simply copy each and every bit of code from this logout so that we do not have to rewrite it again. And let me paste it here. And inside this handler, what we can do, we can remove this thing from here, or we can check for the method to be get, that because we are making a get request. And again here we need to use try and catch like this. So if there is an error, I can simply res.status would be 500.send. Oh, it's something went wrong, so something went wrong. Otherwise we need to handle this try block. So firstly we would be checking, so if not request.session.user ID, because that is what in which we are interested in. So if this is not the case, then again we want to return, so res.status, and status would be 401, that is unauthorized.send, and here I can simply say unauthorized like this. Otherwise we have a user ID, so we can say const user_id would be equal to rec.session.user_id. And now what we can do, we can again use the same client, that is this stitch client, to get the user details. So let's get the user details. So let's say const user equal to await client, and we need to initialize the client first. So const client equal to load stitch like this. And now we can say client dot users dot get, and here we can pass in the user ID like this. And finally we can say res.json would be this user here. And now we can save this, and now we can go to our profile page. And now here inside the profile page, we can get the we can call in that route, that is the /API/me route, very easily inside the use effect hook. So use effect snippets, so use effect, and we would be again using Axios to call in the route, and we want to call this effect only on component mount. So that's why we have added in an empty dependency. So here we can say axios.get /API/me, and then we have the then here. So we have the then response, and then we have the catch error. So error I'm not going to handle, I'm simply going to console log it here. So console.log error message like this, and if we have a response, then we have the data. So here I can create in a state variable, so I can say use a state snippet. So we have the user, set user, and initial state would be null. So null like this. So let me import user state from React also. So if we have the data, so we can simply say set user to be a response dot data like this. Everything is like this. And now inside this layout tags, what I can say, I can check here, that is if not user, I can simply display loading here. So let me display in a paragraph here. So p tags, so loading, though there are better ways to handle or making API requests using use SWR hook, but I'm simply keeping it simple. And if we have a user, so if we have a user here, then I would simply JSON.stringify that. So pre-tags, and here I can simply say JSON.stringify user comma null comma 2 or like this. So let's save this. So let's click on continue with Google. Let's click on yours truly here. Now we see we have loading here, and finally we have this data here, that is this data here for this user, and we have the email also, that is this trulymittal@gmail.com. So let's try to sign in with another user, and that is this yours truly. And we see that we have this user here. So this is how easy it is to add this login and log out. And now one last thing, that is we are not able to see that continue that Google One Tap sign in. I guess that I have made a typo here, and it should be called position and not position. So let's save this, and if I reload the page, we see that now this is working here. That is usemyapp.com with Google. So that was the only issue here, that is there was a spelling mistake here. So it was position, and now everything seems to work fine. So if I click on continue with this thing here, that is verifying, and then we are back to the profile page. That is, we are back to the profile page. And if I log out, we are back here. So let's click on yours truly. And now we are again back on this thing here. So now everything seems to work fine. So guys, that's all about this video. So if you liked the video, do hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do subscribe to the channel. So thank you, bye bye, tata, take care, and have a good day and have a great day.